Tottenham Hotspur have destroyed Manchester United by 3-0 at Old Trafford, and in this video we're going to be diving into the reasons behind their great result and how they exposed Erik ten Hag's Manchester United. Tottenham Hotspur get quite a lot of criticism when their attacking style of play doesn't necessarily work the way they want it to, and so I believe they need to be given some credit when it really does work, and it happened to work in this game against Man United. The way they set up with their wingers spreading out really wide, hugging those touch lines, making sure that they're able to spread this Manchester United back line. They just didn't know how to cope with it, United, and what they really didn't know how to cope with was the balance in midfield. Man United set up defensively in a 4-4-2, means that you've got two people that's trying to organise a press, you've got the four in midfield that should be tucking in to try and defend the centre of the pitch, but this is where it went wrong. Because Tottenham like to overload this midfield area, in particular with Kulusevski, with James Maddison and Udogie moving into midfield, it overwhelms and overloads the two Manchester United midfielders. No matter how really athletic and energetic Manuel Ugarte and Kobbie Mainoo are, they're never going to be able to deal with the overloads that Tottenham posed them in this game. Because Solanke ended up dropping occasionally and Kulusevski and Maddison started to swap places, the rotation with Bentancur and Udogie moving into midfield, a lot of the times what you saw is this box formation, and you ended up getting something of a 4 versus 2 here. Manchester United's midfield two were completely overwhelmed, and where you've seen other teams do so well, namely Arsenal defending against this Tottenham setup, you had the wingers tucking in. Instead, Manchester United ended up leaving their two midfielders and isolating them in the centre of the park. This meant that Bruno Fernandes needed to drop a little bit deeper, but even when he did that, they were still being overloaded due to the rotation and the great movement from Tottenham. And when we talk about one of the goals, which we're going to look at a little bit later, what actually ended up happening is from a counter-attack that Man United tried to perform down their right-hand side, Tottenham's left, you saw emphasis and energy from Mickey van de Ven. You saw Bruno Fernandes being a little bit lost in the centre of the park, Garnacho and Rashford in this particular instance. But what ended up happening is Van de Ven took the ball, and then you're talking about the width with Mazraoui. You're talking about De Ligt being too central because he's being pinned by James Maddison and Solanke into that position, almost guided there. And then you've got that huge space in between fullback and centre-back. A space that we know Manchester City like to occupy, a space that we know that Arsenal like to occupy. And in this particular scenario, Mickey van de Ven saw a massive opportunity early on. And this is down to the great build-up that Tottenham had. But more importantly, it's down to the good setup they had, having their wingers out wide. This is exactly the scenario that they wanted to get, to be able to spread that back four because it was being worked far too much. The midfielders and the wingers weren't doing enough to tuck in and block those central areas, which means that out wide, and in particular between the fullback and centre-back, they were continuously exposed. Let's now take a look at the goals, and I think this first goal perfectly represents the contrast between these two sides. One side not giving it their all, one side wanting to do everything they possibly can to get that win. Remember, we are 3 minutes into this match, and I think that is a huge warning sign for Manchester United going forwards, because you've got Marcus Rashford and you've got Alejandro Garnacho trying to capitalise on a bit of space that they found out on their right-hand side, Tottenham's left-hand side, but Mickey van de Ven is going to intercept this and then drive forwards. Now, if you're a Manchester United fan, this isn't too bad. High forwards in the opposition's half, but the way they recover and the way they attempt to deal with this is pretty horrific. If we move this on, we can already see that Alejandro Garnacho and Marcus Rashford are completely out of picture. They're nowhere to be seen. Mickey van de Ven is now driving forwards down this left-hand side. But look at the space. Bruno Fernandes is the only player that's anywhere near to Mickey van de Ven, and still he is absolutely miles away. But look at the amount of space that Van de Ven has to drive into. Now you might say he's a centre-back, and that is the case, but there's no way he should be given this amount of time. And then what I talked about earlier, if you see here, you can see Werner is actually pinning Mazraoui because he's worried about that pass. He's covering that run. He's covering that passing channel. But what does that do? It opens up a huge space between De Ligt and Mazraoui. Ugarte doesn't cover because he's worried about centrally with James Maddison. And then you've got Kobbie Mainoo with Kulusevski. You've then got Solanke with Lisandro Martinez, and all of a sudden Manchester United are extremely spread. On the top end of your screen you can already see that Diogo Dalot, who has ended up cheating and going forwards a little bit too far, has been beaten towards his goal side by Brennan Johnson. So massive alarm bells need to be ringing, not only for this run, but from this run driving through the heart of their defence, but also it's down to the split between the centre-back and the full-back. And if we just run this on a little bit more, look at the space. Mazraoui now realises, but it's far too late. The pace and the power of Van de Ven is far too much, driving towards the byline, waiting for an opportunity. And it's just nowhere near good enough from the closing down from a Manchester United point of view, but it's fantastic from a Tottenham point of view. The drive, the determination, the energy, the work rate. Look at this. It's absolutely fantastic. There is no way this could happen from a Manchester United point of view, by the way. There is no way this should be allowed. This should not happen at all. But Tottenham managed to make it work. They drive through the heart of Man United and they end up getting their rewards. The second thing I want to realise, if we just take this back a touch, just keep your eyes on this side of the pitch. Keep your eyes. And if we focus here a little bit more, we can see that Diogo Dalot is still not goal side of Brennan Johnson. Still. He's nowhere to be found. And look at the space that he's got to be able to run into. You've got to be thinking about the defensive side of this. But Tottenham managed to make a great moment out of this, crossing the ball through from the byline. It's great work from Mickey Van de Ven. But look at this. Look at the space that Diogo Dalot has left Brennan Johnson. Brennan Johnson, who got caught a lot of stick and a lot of flack from his recent performance against Arsenal. But he's bounced back perfectly with a goal here, but also with a brilliant display once again. And look at the space. Look at the space between him and Diogo Dalot, who seemingly gives up on the opportunity to defend. It is shocking, but brilliant from Tottenham. One thing that Tottenham did almost perfectly in this game against Manchester United is maintain pressure and maintain attacks, and they did this due to the positioning of a couple of people. Pedro Porro and Destiny Udogie are normally vacating their left-back and right-back roles respectively and moving into midfield into these areas. Instead, they ended up dropping back a little bit deeper, and what this did is not only has it helped Tottenham really recycle possession through Rodrigo Bentancur, but at the same time it also gave space to Kulusevski and Maddison. Due to the fact that Manchester United only had two midfielders who were willing to do the defensive work, instead of Rashford tucking in and instead of Garnacho tucking in, Ugarte and Mainu, as I mentioned previously, were completely overwhelmed, but it meant that when the ball was actually turned over and it went to the likes of Martinez or De Ligt, they didn't have an option. And although Garnacho was able to spin in behind occasionally, you've then got the option of Mickey Van de Ven to come and cover. And the same can be said on the other side. Because Romero and Van de Ven are so athletic and so good at recovering possession, when Marcus Rashford ended up spinning and when Garnacho ended up spinning, although they didn't have enough time because of the pressure from Tottenham, whenever they did get the ball out, it was always hurried. It was always a percentage pass, a low percentage pass to try and play over the top into these wide areas, and it always found its way to a Tottenham boot, which allowed them to then recycle possession and continue the attack onto Manchester United's goal, maintaining that immense pressure. I've heard quite a lot of people say that the sending off completely changed the game, and I don't think that could be further from the truth. When you think about the goals that Manchester United conceded and that Tottenham scored, I don't think they had anything to do with Man United being a man down, and I'll explain why. This is the second goal. So, what have you got? You've got Dominic Solanke out-muscling Casemiro. That has nothing to do with an extra player being on or off the pitch. Full context, in this scenario, Diogo Dalot has made a run from left back up this left-hand channel to try and help Alejandro Garnacho. There's nothing wrong with that, but it needs to be remembered that there is no left back in this position currently, which means that Lisandro Martinez, who is currently off picture right now, he's right here, he needs to be aware of that situation and the fact that his left back is currently nowhere to be seen. So when Tottenham win the ball back and then develop their play, we need to be aware that there is no left-sided defensive player for Manchester United. I think Dominic Solanke does absolutely brilliant here to try and win the ball off Casemiro, and then that's the trigger for Spurs to go. You've got Johnson, you've got Kulusevski, you've got Maddison driving forwards. De Ligt is in no man's land. Martinez is in no man's land. Both players inside the Tottenham half, both players away from the halfway line. And then you're looking at how play progresses. You're looking at Lisandro Martinez. There's a big question mark to be asked here. Do you A, make sure that you delay possession, wait for your left back to come and help you out here? Or do you B, decide to try and dive in and win the ball? He obviously goes for the second option, but I can't understand why. I don't see the benefit. There is no way you're winning that here. There's no way. And it's that kind of game intelligence that I think is a massive problem. Look, he tries to win the ball, and then because they have no left side, it's completely isolated. It's completely open, and you're leaving your two teammates just isolated. You know that your two midfielders are not available. You know that there's no protection or cover behind you. Why are you diving in? But it's brilliant from Tottenham because they take advantage of the space that's been left in behind this Manchester United defence, and they make the most of it. I mean, look at this. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 on 2 nearly. It is absolutely crazy. And of course, Manchester United do not deal with the situation. It's an unfortunate deflection that ends up going to Kulusevski. But I've got to say, Kulusevski's touch here is absolutely sensational. He's in mid-air here. He's almost ninja kicking the football into the net. It was unbelievable to see. I mean, look at that touch. That is fantastic. But it comes from a scenario that Manchester United do not deal with, and I don't think they deal with it sensibly. I don't think they gave themselves a chance to deal with it. Tottenham were fantastic. They were properly good, and they managed to isolate so many duels, so many spaces, and take advantage of this poor defending. Finally, before we wrap up, let's take a look at the third and final goal. The nail in the coffin for Manchester United and arguably Erik ten Hag. And this is the only goal that I might give some credence to the fact that Manchester United were down to 10 men. However, would you argue that Bruno Fernandes is the sole player that would be marking Dominic Solanke here? I'm not so sure. Could you argue that they might set up their corner defensive strategy differently due to the fact that they have an extra player? Possibly. However, I still think this is terrible defending. Before the ball is even kicked, you've got Dominic Solanke who is completely free. Remember, this is your goal scorer, and even if you don't know that, you might argue, well, you don't know who's going to be scoring the goal. He's Tottenham's striker. You need to be marking Tottenham striker. I think it's pretty obvious. But Mason Mount and Rasmus Højlund get dragged out due to the option of a short corner. Now for me, if you're down to 10 men and you still need to defend in the box, I think you can allow yourself to have one tucked back in because the overload is just far too great. They decide not to do that, and you've got a free man ready to run into the box. But as the play develops and as the corner develops, you've got Papamatta Sarr right here. He gets a great flick on at the front post, and I think Casemiro should do a little bit better, but it's still salvageable. And it's salvageable because you could have the option of these two trying to block the Tottenham players. It just so happens there's still a 3v2. We talk a lot about overloads in this channel and in a lot of videos on this channel, and I do think they're so important. And in this particular scenario, as the header develops and as the play in this corner develops, what you see is actually 1, 2, 3 Tottenham players able to beat against 2 Manchester United defenders because the ball will beat De Ligt after it gets flicked on, and it's just so difficult for Man United to defend. I feel sorry for some of the defenders in this particular scenario because I don't think the corner routine is particularly good from United, and again, Bruno Fernandes could make a difference here. It's just a shame for them, but it's so poor. The marking is non-existent, and Tottenham once again capitalise. And we spoke earlier on in this channel a few months ago about Dominic Solanke and the ability that he has and what he could give to the Tottenham side, and this was it, being that fox in the box, having the ability to really make the most of small chances, being able to get those tap-ins, and he does fantastically well here, and he started to settle into life at Tottenham Hotspur pretty well. Look at that touch. That touch is brilliant. That's exactly what you want from your central striker, to be able to get those, to be able to sniff out those chances, and that's exactly what he does here. Tottenham Hotspur were absolutely phenomenal, and Manchester United were exposed time after time again due to the great setup, the great tactical play, and the drive and determination from every single Tottenham player. But of course, guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. What did you think of Tottenham? What did you think of Manchester United? And what is next for both clubs? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope to see you in the next one. But until then, my friends, take care.